Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate the opening reception of Creativity in the Time of COVID, The Art of Grieving, an exhibition of art and creative work featuring Marked by COVID and the National COVID Memorial. My name is Sarah Press, and I'm a co-organizer of this exhibition, as well as a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of History of Science at Harvard. It's my pleasure to introduce you to all our fabulous speakers tonight, and my job to encourage you to eat more food, drink more wine, and come back tomorrow for more exciting talks and workshops. Our first speakers tonight are the architects and innovative forces behind creativity in the time of COVID-19. Tonight, they'll be sharing the story behind the creation of this international archive of pandemic art and the nationwide tour they've embarked on to exhibit it, culminating in our final exhibition here in Boston. Natalie Phillips is an associate professor of English at Michigan State and affiliated faculty in cognitive science. She founded and co-leads an interdisciplinary lab, the Digital Humanities and Literary Cognition Lab, and does work at the intersection of literature, neuroscience, and the arts. She is a co-PI on the Creativity in the Time of COVID-19 grant, which you can learn more about on her webpage for the Digital Humanities and Literary Cognition Lab at Michigan State. Soohyun Cho is an assistant professor of integrative studies in the arts and humanities at Michigan State. Her research spans disability studies, global popular culture, digital humanities, and literary cognition. As an affiliate faculty member of the Digital Humanities and Literary Cognition Lab, Cho explores the impact of art and cultural engagement on health, designing accessible art events and developing community-based pedagogies. Please welcome Natalie and Sue.
Okay, everyone, thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks you so much for being here. We're delighted to be here and to see you all. I don't like standing behind a podium, so I'm gonna be like pulling this over so I can talk to you. Really? Is that okay?
Let me see. I have
I mean, I'll keep talking until she... So today we're going to be talking about an amazing $3 million grant that came out of nowhere that we were amazed and honored and excited to receive from the Mellon Foundation. And it's part of a 4-year project called Creativity in the Time of COVID-19. And Countway is the last of 5 national exhibitions for creativity in the time of COVID-19. And I can't thank Kristen from Marked by COVID, Sarah, Craig, Meredith, Yasmina, and everyone involved in this project enough for making it happen. So, as mentioned, I'm Natalie Phillips. I'm the PI and the director of the project. And here today with me is the one person without which none of this could have happened, and that is Soohyun Cho. She is our brilliant grant co-writer, exhibition co-convener, health humanities and accessibility specialist, and colleague, and it was only due to her work that this was possible from the beginning. She is just part of our much larger team, which is part of this Digital Humanities and Literary Cognition Lab that we mentioned, where students from English, cognitive science, education, neuroscience, game studies, and beyond come together to lead this work. It's a student-run lab. It's deeply interdisciplinary, and I'm so proud to be representing them today. So I'm also a professor with disability, which results in episodic muscle spasms, which will likely appear now that I've talked about them, that can take me to the ground or create hiccup speech. I invite you to play with the disruptive rhythms that this creates in the traditional academic talk. This project is actually dedicated to creating new spaces for disability and difference. And so I also urge you to move around in this room however you need to honor your body-mind. Reclaim the space, get something to drink, take a break, get some food. I won't mind if it's in the middle of our talk. So, Creativity in the Time of COVID is a project that explores the diverse ways that people turn to creative outlets during the pandemic. The baby idea actually started in a class of mine at Michigan State. It was March 2020, and students had just gone into lockdown. and we'd all gone on to Zoom, like so many of us had. And as the class went on, they began to share all the ways they were coping. And they were all turning to everyday acts of creativity. I had them journal, and they started sharing, and it was 22 out of the 25 of them. And one student burned a guitar and rebuilt it to play his favorite death metal melody. Another who was working on the MSU janitorial staff to bleach every classroom and space to make it safe at that point, started managing her mental health by painting these bright colored ostriches on everything around her. Others started crocheting and painting rocks, and there was gaming, lots of Animal Crossings, and TikTok and sourdough baking and protest posters and gardening. And we wondered, if this was happening in a single class, what was happening nationally and internationally? So working with a team across the US, facilitated by this possible grant, we started collecting samples for a digital archive of what people did creatively, not just like Picasso style, but everyday style during COVID, and how this related to their personal stories of self-care and healing during the pandemic. And one of the goals of this project is to think about how this art making not only has the power to process grief, but that this force has a power to reveal and ideally push back against the systemic inequities being revealed by COVID as it continues today. So because of this, students on the project, they've been crucial. It's a student-led lab. Coordinated online outreach, thinking in particular about how to reach and amplify the voices of intersectional communities, including Black and Brown communities, BIPOC communities, LGBTQIA+, disability communities, as well as medical and patient communities. And to our excitement, this project that began with like 22 students in a class of mine, there are now, in a larger archive, there are now over 2,000 artworks from across the US, with contributions from Portugal, Mexico, Korea, China, Colombia, India, Canada, France, Singapore, the UK, Brazil, Australia, Ecuador, Indonesia, and Vietnam. Hurrah. What's really important here too, and I hope that you will explore this as you go through and explore the pieces that are up, is that what makes this project so different from a traditional art archive and exhibition is the fact that each art piece is attached to a story of how that person used art to cope during COVID, or turn to creativity as an act of protest or self-care or resistance, and sometimes through expressions of laughter, as in this humorous piece, The Great Toilet Paper Crisis. But using the collected pandemic artworks combined with stories from COVID, in the artist's own words, we've been able to begin mapping the diverse art forms being used both by professional artists and everyday folks who don't define that way, turning to all kinds of creative outlets to explore the role of art in health and healing and mental health. And it's surprising just how many people in this survey that we attached to this describe creativity as a necessity, not just like something they did to occupy boredom, but as as necessary during the pandemic. And then really examining the ways that art served as a tool to facilitate social change and build community identities around social justice issues like Black Lives Matter or disability justice. So, in thinking about the art of grieving, one of the most powerful examples for me is a set of tribute posters. And this is a set of posters that were created by Soren Glassing, who is a hospital chaplain, LGBTQIA+, hospital chaplain who had just lost their husband to leukemia. And to process that loss, they actually went through the hospice ward where all of the patients were being sort of covered with the protective equipment, and no one could really see their faces and connect. And so he went and COVID met with each of the families and found out personal details about what made them tick, what made them, really what it was about them, and then created these individualized posters to place above each of the beds. And part of this was that he believed that this allowed the families to be able to connect and grieve, as well as the hospital staff to be able to connect with their patients, who they could no longer see through the protective equipment. The next piece is a photograph by someone who I know, who's actually a physician who helps me. Yep, enjoy. Someone tell a joke so I can pretend I'm laughing. She works with me on neurological challenges, and her husband is an ICU nurse, and was working during the pandemic, and actually her husband needed to leave to stay in an RV. To protect the family. And so this is the final picture of him with the toddler right before they left. And that became his home for the next 9 months. But, and as she puts it, right, as a wife of an ICU nurse, creativity in COVID meant being mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, best friend, and psychologist for my two toddlers, they're both sons, when my husband moved out to keep his family safe. But photography actually turned into their lifeline, as the photos of their toddlers became a way to connect him back to their family and their sons as they hit these major milestones in their lives. And so you can see how this everyday act became so crucial. A final artist that we'll talk about, who identifies as, love this, ready, quote, a gender nonconforming Jewish, Arab, Moroccan cryptike, as well as a wheelchair user living in poverty, end quote, made this image of the golden mask specifically when hospitals ran out of vents and were contemplating what to do when they ran out of vents. And they triaged, as this person points out, using disability, obesity, and often racialized markers. We know this. But they hope, in creating this depiction of where wheelchairs are sort of falling off into a chasm, that their art will be able to convey the famous slogan of the disability activist Stacey Milburn, "Nobody is disposable," using the piece to grieve that loss of disabled lives and raise awareness. It's all good.
Countway Library will be closed in 50 minutes. Please gather your belongings and proceed to exit.
Don't gather your belongings.
Stay.
So thinking about disability culture and accessibility is central to our project, and this is where I'm going to handle it over to Sue.
Announcement, yes. So thinking about disability culture and accessibility, I can flip it.
You can do it.
Is central to our project. And this project has culminated, as Natalie mentioned, in series of online and in-person exhibitions, this being the 5th one, that set a new standard for accessibility. And because our goal was to go beyond the Americans with Disabilities Act, we sought to create infrastructure that emphasized disability community and accessibility all across venues and programming in every stage of the project. So we were trying to be really creative in terms of how do we make that happen. So for instance, we created an art submission form that is accessible in plain English, 14 foreign languages, American Sign Language, and Braille packet. We also used QR codes for our disability and accessibility placards, such as what is disability and when is disability, among others. And throughout this process, we introduced the concept of disability culture, highlighting that disability is not just medical diagnosis, but arises from the intersections of cultural practices, community norms, and personal identity, as well as the range of accessibility features and their importance. So for each piece of artwork in the archive, all 2,000 of them, we have created either an image description or an audio description available by QR code, so that to make it more accessible not only to blind and low vision individuals, but also to anyone who would enjoy art through different sensory modalities. So for example, in this piece, visitors can access the image descriptions read aloud through our QR code to hear about the visual details of Samuel Chen's self-portrait here. And simultaneously, they can hear the experts from his story shared by survey about how this was created during their 3-week quarantine in a hotel while traveling from Russia to Singapore. So like all the artworks that you see exhibited here, you can find the QR code as well, and I encourage you to explore with your phone QR code and like engage with all these artworks with multisensory modalities. So all these materials, along with the accessible materials, will be made available in our digital archive, which we plan to launch at the end of this year. So be on the lookout. And I will briefly talk about all our previous exhibitions, because ultimately our goal is to create a space that engage audiences to reflect how COVID has shaped our experiences with medicine, illness, and disability. So last year we held 3 satellite exhibitions across University at Buffalo, U.S. Air Force Academy, and Washington University in St. Louis. And we just completed the central exhibition and conference at MSU just like a couple of weeks ago. And this satellite exhibition here is, in our collaboration with Marked by COVID, is our final show. So the University at Buffalo exhibition focused on amplifying the voices of BIPOC, queer communities, and local artists. It was held in a building complex that houses various facilities, including art studios, a disability rights office, a gaming space, and a media art. And artists were everywhere, and we noticed the exhibition and how that integrated the existing vibrant communities at Buffalo. The next exhibition was held at the military base of the U.S. Air Force Academy, curated around neurodiversity, accessibility, and self-care. And here we introduced a military group who, as we all know, are rarely given permission to come out about disabilities or even talk about it, to the concept of accessibility and prioritizing self-care. And the exhibition at WashU was framed around medical humanities. And in this exhibition, we worked to humanize the stories of healthcare workers, first responders, as well as patients and families. So this all culminated in our exhibition just a couple of weeks ago, which emphasized the multi-sensory experience with the pandemic art and stories through, again, diverse access points, including image descriptions, QR codes, sensory-friendly hours, tactile engaged art, which you can see here, and respite spaces, seated yoga, and beyond. So we also held a joint conference and exhibition in a campus gallery space. And as you can see, like, this is my favorite moment where, like, at one point everyone was sitting on the floor and it was like, you all, like, just like you own this space, like, with whatever body mind that requires you to do. And Natalie, seeing you sitting on the floor right now, I'll give you the talk.
Time to come back.
Yes.
So part of this was motivated by the fact that sometimes my body goes to the ground, and so I was overjoyed and sort of amazingly touched to watch this entire community just claim the ground space as this open space, and it really seemed to open up new conversations on all kinds of subjects. That sort of vulnerability that my body sort of manifests, encourages other people to talk and to engage that way. So the next step for our project, in addition to being here delightfully at Countway, involves bringing this work in accessibility and disability studies together with health humanities, particularly in hospital spaces or medically associated spaces. And this possibility really came into focus at the WashU of St. Louis exhibition, where art was emphasizing the crucial roles and toll on healthcare workers that were on display again here at Harvard. I think you can see that in all of the artwork, a lot of the artwork that you see in this. But because health and well-being was such a strong theme in all of our submissions, we became more interested in how creativity could shape both patient and doctors' experiences in medical spaces. So we just received a $50K seed grant to start doing this in Michigan on the ground. So by putting a curated exhibition from creativity and COVID in hospitals and medical spaces, Art as Medicine is inviting the new version. Art as Medicine invites viewers to make therapeutic connections between the art, the stories, and their own pandemic experiences. We're picking works meant to spark conversations between medical workers, hospital staff, patients, and community members, encouraging them to reflect on the issues of social justice and disability awareness. But finally, we want these exhibits to create space for memorialization of people and their shared experiences in settings that rarely or difficultly afford such space. And our goal is to create places to process grief and explore the crucial role of creativity in managing all kinds of health challenges, not just related to COVID, both large and small. And this is part of actually why we're asking you for feedback on our exhibition here, which is shown via this QR code. Everyone's phones out. But so we can get more input on how to best engage people with COVID art in ways that are actually opening rather than necessarily triggering, and open up into ways of actually imagining how that could be used in different spaces and possibilities. So throughout all of this work, we seek to honor the number of people who passed during the pandemic, which this sculpture from Jenna Hupp Andrews, which you can see outside on the left, called Weight Bearer, does so powerfully by weaving together masks collected daily from her husband and embroidered with the number of people of daily lives lost in Michigan, does so powerfully, and join that with the amazing Marked by COVID, which you will hear about as demonstrated in the connection to their National COVID Memorial, to document and grieve the deaths of so many with tributes from friends and loved ones. Simultaneously, through the stories attached to each artwork, like Marked by COVID's testimonials, we seek to do for each artwork what Soren Glassing, the person who created those tribute posters, hoped his posters would do for his patients, for them to, quote, be humanized and not just a number, end quote. And this is our ultimate goal as you walk through this exhibition, to take the vast landscape of grief and boredom and malaise and deep injustice around the pandemic and make it human in all its messy complexity, and inspire us to move forward in whatever beautiful, painful way we can. Thank you. If we have time, we would love to have Q&A. Yeah? Go. Go, Gadget. Oh, shoot. On the thanks. There are thanks to so many humans, it's actually almost absurd. A $3 million grant does a lot, but it's expanded to so many groups across the US and across, including South Korea now, that there's just an endless list of all the people we need to thank. And it's deep, it's strong, it's powerful, it's wide. And I think that's really a testament to the project and the number of people who have committed to caring about it. All right, Q&A.
I'm gonna pull back the survey in case you missed it.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the description of the artworks and who wrote them. Did the artist himself provide this, or was this work by the curators? Are there professionals who do this in a standardized way?
Want me to do it? Sure.
So will you repeat the question?
Oh, yeah. So the question was how we actually create the image descriptions, whether or not they're in collaboration with the artist, whether it's done by curators, and Yes, what the process is.
Oh.
I can.
I'll go ahead. So for when we initially sent out the call for art, we asked for all the survey questions, and ideally we would have loved to reach out and gather their version of the image description, but with the 2,000 pieces, what we did was pull their description of their answers to those survey questions, and we used the quotations to create an image description of that. Does that sound just?
And the students were all trained by disability organizations and leading disability organizations on how to create image descriptions. And so that was part of our excitement in the project, is that it was disability centered as well. A lot of students who were creating the image descriptions were coming from the disability community at Michigan State and the surrounding areas. So they'll be able to take that skill out into the communities around them and continue to do it in both their social media practices and in art practices ongoing.
The training podcast of which will be made available as one of the open access resources.
There's a sign holder outside by the exhibit with this QR code. So if you find yourself, exploring the exhibit and then having feedback after that, there'll be another opportunity to scan a QR code.
Have you had a chance to assess other disease states or other times when this has been especially stressed?
We haven't. Part of the goal of that next step of the process was to think sort of historically about some of the work that, about some of the Spanish flu, for example, and how few records we have of everyday experiences of that and everyday experiences of creativity. But we do have an extensive record of different artists and things like this who've turned to it. So part of our next step, I guess, is to dig in to the art therapy world, not in the traditional sense of a guided, slow, psychologized practice for someone, let's say, with PTSD or something like this, but to actually let this, I think what's so powerful about this project is that individuals chose their own creative outlet. It wasn't guided by someone else. They turned to what felt natural to them. And I think that democratizes things in a really powerful way. Also, no one wants to actually go and do things like physical therapy, right? Art therapy is a little different, but when you think about what someone actually wants to do and naturally turns to as a creative act, I think that really opens up whole new spaces for individuals to develop a skill for processing whatever that modality may be. Yeah, Jeremy.
So I think this is fantastic in so many ways, but I just want to focus on something. As both of you started doing this work, has it changed how you've made sense of COVID as you interact with all these fabulous artists and art makers and democratizing culture, and now you're part of that? What's changed for you?
You are.
This is coming from the entire lab, and including the students, because when we talk about it, because I was working in Korea when we were co-writing the grant, working at 3 a.m. in the morning, and this has become our way of checking in on each other, and this has been our way of coping, and we call this project as our creativity during the time of COVID pandemic, and and for me personally, I'm not really good at talking about my emotions or processing it. And it's almost, I was thinking back to what Kristen said earlier over there when we were eating something, in terms of it's almost it's like we're given permission to talk about it. And it almost felt like that, because at one point, because everyone in my family, everyone in my friends were because we were all impacted one way or another, that it was hard for me to talk about it because everyone was talking about it in a weird sense. But that's just me. So for me personally, it was like I get to talk about it personally. I'll stop at that.
I'll just say that I'm someone who does work in literature and neuroscience, exploring the cognitive value and intricacy of the arts, and to gather these stories from everyday people from so many different aspects, from globally, and just open-ended stories. To me, it felt so important to not have it be in that closed laboratory setting and not just looking at like, okay, where do we find the brain activity? And I know that's an unusual thing. Most people don't do literature, neuroscience on the arts, but I think it really opened my experience. It also kept me from detaching from COVID. I think so many of us, we just want to turn away, and there's so many ways that people do it. And it's become a fascinating component now because it's so close to me and us and the work that I just don't even realize it. Just how deep that engagement is, and then I'll just start talking about it as though everyone should be engaged, and that I'll be sort of startled to realize that this is why I think it's so important to get your feedback on these works, because they are triggering for many people, and there's a lot of work. So I think that's been, for me, it's been very personally connecting to so many people, and I have been so powerfully affected by the stories that people have shared about how much art helped them. And I didn't expect that.
Speaking as a literary scholar yourself.
Yeah, right. As a literature teacher and scholar, you want to believe that reading literature or creating art, right? Exactly. And I want to study it, and I want to show it in the brain. But hearing from people about just how much it's helped, and helped in not just this light let's make butterflies way. We created a number of butterflies for very good reasons, but side note. But this helped me with the emotional challenges of isolation or of losing a loved one, or and it not as though life altering, not it all of a sudden was so much better, but just something, an outlet that could just turn and transform and recognize some crucial piece of that mental space. And I really hadn't appreciated the power of just one artwork, one act to do that or open it up.